We just got to do like a normal standard intro. You know how it is?
Yeah.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Bright Futura. Oh, dear. What fun we have. Anyway, welcome back to the Conversations with Samantha podcast. I am Joshua Hinkins. I have with me my good friend for what feels like a long time. Some would say too long.
It has been a long time now.
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure Moses was etching out those tablets.
Yeah, hadn't even parted the sea yet.
Not even parted the sea. What an amateur. Anyway, who are you and what's your name and where'd you come from?
My name's Mike and I currently live in a tiny little town called Walsall.
Well, fair enough. I was just about to say, it's like tiny town, and then I realised, no, I was the one that lived in Wolverhampton. You guys lived in Walsall.
Yeah. I did once upon a time live in Wolverhampton as well, yeah.
Yeah, what a place. The times.
It's lovely.
So basically I've got you here today to discuss D&D stuff. Who'd have thought on a D&D podcast? Crazy,
I know,
right?
crazy.
I wanted to go over some bits like when you started playing, whether you're running characters right now or you're a DM, and bits and pieces like that. I thought you'd be interested in doing that.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant.
And our, 3 audience members are going to be very interested in that as well. So here we go. My first question for you, Mike, is when did you start playing? Well, actually, no, I take that back. Is 5e the only version of D&D you've played, or have you played other versions?
5e is the only version of the game that I've played, but it's not my initial introduction to D&D. My initial introduction was way back when Gauntlet was released on PlayStation. So I've sort of like dabbled in the world of D&D for quite a while. Gauntlet was Baldur's Gate, of course.
Oh, yeah.
So we're looking at 2001 was the one that I played.
Right.
Yeah, so the first Baldur's Gate that I probably played was Dark Alliance, which is actually known to be probably the worst one in the game series. But when 2001, I was very young then. I was under 10 years old, so I was an impressionable youth that would consume any form of video game possible.
It's the best time to be, taken over by the devil, as it were.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Satan's game and all that.
Satan's game, yes. I'm here for that one. My next question for you would be, if you are currently a player, what characters or characters are you running? And also, do you DM?
So I am currently running a Vidalcan wizard. He's currently only level 4 and his name is, Mogalir Otak, Mogo for short. He is a somewhat neurotic, strange man, I would say. He sort of obsesses over little things like how certain trinkets work and the inner workings of spells and how can he capitalize on that and make it his own. It sort of fills a little niche in my own brain, I guess. And yes, I DM. I've been running a game for probably, I think it's 2 years now. You are also in that game.
I am also in that game.
Yeah, I think it's been running for 2 years now.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a long time now.
To think, like coming up 2 years, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and the characters are only level 11? Level 11, I think.
Yeah,
it's I enjoy it a lot. It's quite a standard sort of like high fantasy setting. but I like to throw my own strange, weird, and wonderful little characters in there.
I was going to say, because we are not, for that campaign, we're not running a Wizards module, are we? We're not running a Wizards of the Coast module. It's all...
it's completely my own setting, so any of the sort of opinions that you have on like certain races, it's kind of a controversial topic right now, with like orcs, for instance. All of that stuff sort of goes out the window. Orcs aren't just an inherently evil thing in my setting. Same with sort of like drow and things like that. I like to throw those crutches sort of out the window a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can fall into the trap of generic high fantasy, and it just doesn't really work for me.
No, same. I mean, that's one of the whole reasons why I made Tolban the way he is. The race that he technically is like, because he's half orc, half tiefling. It's meant to be like chaotic evil. The race that he is.
Yeah.
And I was like, I am not here for that.
Yeah.
I think
I mean, one of the biggest issues with the game, in my personal opinion, is the alignment aspect, because in what other world, look at our own, no one is 100% good, no one's 100% bad, and swaying that way 100% on every sort of situation, every topic that comes up, it just doesn't feel like a natural thing for me. So alignments is another thing that we like. I know you also do it. We just do away with alignments for the most part.
I think the idea of someone being completely 100% like lawful good just sounds tiring. Like,
yeah.
Get the fuck out of it. No.
That to me doesn't sound like something fun to play either. Like, for instance, if I was plunged into a D&D world, I was in one of the campaigns that we have played or are playing, and you know, one day I see someone, they have a magical item, but they're a nice person, I don't want to take that from them. But then I see perhaps another person who I don't like as much, and they have a magical item. Me as a human being, I might want to take that from that person, and being swayed just based on, you know, this made-up alignment that I decided at the day of my birth, just doesn't really make sense to me.
No. You said you were playing a Wizard Vidalcan, right?
Yes.
Why did you choose both the class and the race as your options? Out of everything you could have chosen, why these two?
Yeah, there is a little bit to why I sort of chose the race.
If it gives away any story points, you don't have
No. In an outside of the game perspective, Vidalcans came in with the Magic the Gathering expansion. So, I think it's Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, or the second one that came out. Magic the Gathering, although I'm terrible at it and I've never really kept up with the game, I've never been a massive collector of the cards. Me and yourself have actually played a few rounds at some point.
I was like, have I played Magic? Yes.
Yeah. That world, that setting has always appealed to me. I don't know if it is just, you know, the rich history that Magic the Gathering has, or it's more based around the artwork and the level of detail that goes into each individual card. I really appreciate that game for what it is. And when, obviously, they brought a couple of races across, which were Vidalcan, the Simic hybrids, and I believe it was
no, Warforged.
Warforged, maybe one of them, and then the elephant race as well. Their name's escaping me a little bit. But when they brought all of those across, I was looking into them, and the Vidalkin sort of appealed to me the most because in the footnotes in the book, it talks about how the fact they always strive for perfection, despite knowing they could never reach it. And the character that I made from that, he's more on the side of being aware that he'll never reach that, and he sort of deviates away from that mindset. It's sort of more of like an other in that race, and I think that's really interesting. That's a really cool place to build a character from. So I really wanted to go with that. And then the wizard side of things, the way that my brain works, it never really turns off fully. And I got to make this really analytical character that sort of obsessed over little things like trinkets and magic that he maybe doesn't understand. So in the campaign that we're playing, he received just a simple golden orb, and he just, for the life of him, could not figure out what this was or how to get into it or what it could do. And I spent several sessions just tinkering with it and finding different ways that I could interact with it and possibly figure out what it is. Ultimately, it ended up being a bad thing, but that's his sort of vice. Like, he cannot leave things alone. He needs to figure it out, and I thought that was really interesting. Originally, I was going to make him the sort of bumbling wizard that's really terrible at physical things, but then I ended up realizing that's sort of leaning into the aspects that I don't like about the standard D&D. I wanted to be a bit more like get in there and get things done with him, whether that causes him problems or not. I just wanted to do something a little bit different with him. I could ramble on for hours about character creation, essentially.
You and I both know, like, the pair of us can and will go into like crazy detail about who our characters are and that kind of thing. And I always enjoy it more playing with other people when they have like this solid idea of who their character is and are able to portray that through what it is they do in game, whether or not, if we're sat around the same table and they're like using mannerisms that their character would use, and that person disappears and whoever it is they are playing is there. I think being able to have people see what it is you see in your own head as well.
Yeah.
So we all have an image of what our characters look like and sound like and act and all that in our own heads, but then being able to portray that to another person and getting the idea across to them and have them fully believing it as well. I think that's a really cool part of D&D.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of D&D is sort of like there's suspension of disbelief and sort of losing yourself in the world and the characters and things like that. And when you have such a good understanding of the person that you are portraying, that becomes a lot easier for yourself and the other people that are at the table. And I think a lot of that can be helped with the DM side of things as well. So if the DM really knows their NPCs and really gets into them as well, then it helps the players really sort of like involve themselves in the world a little bit more. I think that's one of the aspects of the game that really drew me in when I started trying to play with a few one-shots here and there, and then I just decided to go all in, as it were.
Yeah, like I remember, I think, what was the first one shot we did was you, me, and Soph.
I believe it was.
In that little, in like a little 3-room dungeon thing, just as an intro, because I think I I hadn't long started playing D&D.
Yeah.
And I tried my hand at DMing. I think that was the first time I DM'd, actually, I think.
Yeah. Yes, I remember it well, actually. There was a I believe, our other friend, Sam, Maven, was also in that game. Because I
No, not that one.
believe, was it not that one?
No,
with the Will-O-Wisp?
No. It was before that. This one was, Soph was a Tabaxi.
Okay.
I can't remember what you were playing as. Because she was a Tabaxi rogue. And there was a necromancer. And you guys killed him real quickly at the first time round. And then he came back as an undead.
Yes, I remember.
And the suit of armour on the wall came to life.
Yeah, because there was essentially was that person also chained up at the time, and we were all immediately like, maybe we should just leave him. If he's chained here, it's probably a reason.
I think so, yeah.
Let's just walk away from that. And then it unfolded, and we eventually let him out anyway, and he turned out to be the sort of big bad of the one shot.
Yeah.
That feels like a long time ago now.
Because it is. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about your character, Mogo, why the race, why the class. Playing as Mogo, or even as the DM for your other campaign, have there been any moments for you that have stood out in both regards? So, like, as Mogo, have you been like, okay, this is the reason why I play Mogo? Or as the DM being like, okay, that was fucking cool. This is why I fucking like these characters.
Yeah, I think there's actually been a few things. I'll start with Mogo. So early on in the campaign that I'm playing Mogo, there was a situation where we were essentially shown a sort of vision of a great battle that happened in the past. Yeah. It was almost like a time travel situation. We were put in the situation itself, and we were fighting in that battle as the people that fought there. I think it was like thousands of years prior to current day.
That sounds about right.
Of that whole dream sequence, vision, whatever, the general of the army stepped forward and addressed Mogo by his family name, and he handed him an object. And when Mogo took that object, exchanged a few words, and everyone was whisked back into present day, he looked in his palm and he still had the object. That began an obsession of his with tinkering and really trying to understand the world that he lives in. A little bit of backstory: he's not exactly from the area that he's in when the campaign starts. He's not from around here. It sort of there's this not childlike wonder, but there's this sort of level of intelligence that's like, I don't understand any of this. I want to, like, badly. And he obsesses over things, and he really gets to learn the inner workings of little things. And now he has this image in his head of, how did we go back there? How can I make us do that again? So almost like this, he slowly got the cogs turning, trying to figure out, can I make us go back? Is there a way that magic can help me get back to a time in the past? Can I use this to help the people that are now with me, my new friends? So things like that, where I can really sort of dig my claws into the inner workings of a character because of things that are happening around him. That is what makes me want to play Mogo, and in some respects want to play the game itself. And I think a little bit of it is just because my brain obsesses over little things like that as well. But in terms of DMing, there's a little bit more to why I enjoy DMing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a lot younger, I'm talking like early high school, one of the things that I really excelled in was English, so writing, creative writing, and one of the other things that I excelled in was drama. And
yeah, I was all right at the drama, just the English was horrendous.
Yeah, but because of that, back then, one of the things that I wanted to do was at some point write a book, and I was big on like fantasy novels. I had all of the Lord of the Rings books, and I read them cover to cover several times. I've read every single Harry Potter book. I read the Silmarillion, which is also a J.R.R. Tolkien book. I had this intense fascination with high fantasy and fantasy adjacent things. And now, as a DM, I get to sort of scratch that itch a little bit. It's not something that ever went away, but I just sort of focused on other things that were more like sort of art based.
Yeah.
But now I get to commission full maps of the world that I've created. I get to commission artworks of the characters that I've grown to love and appreciate, as if they were someone that I know. I know how they look so well that I can get artwork of them and give them to players. I now know the sort of things that make these characters tick, and I can add little plot points in for those characters that will really make the players feel like they are a part of the world. And I think that those little moments where, for instance, your character in my campaign, he has this...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he has this relationship with an otherworldly being who is very much tied to the ocean and sort of the life within it. And adding those little moments where Fiyero can get a glimpse of that and you really get to see how much it means to him. Things like that really make me want to be a DM and continue playing this campaign.
I will say, I do think the relationship that Fiyero has with Amara, which is the god that he, that you just spoke about. I don't think I've seen, once I've played, I don't think I've seen that anywhere before. That kind of, it's almost like a friendship, but further than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. It's a fundamental understanding of two beings. They both know who each other are to a point where they have nothing but respect for one another, which is something that I haven't even seen in other games, not even in sort of the popular online games that you see, such as like Critical Role or High Rollers or anything like that. There's not a relationship between a higher being like Amara and Fiyero, and just it's the little things where Amara could call Fiyero out on the things that he is doing and vice versa. You never see it on the other side of things, and I appreciate that a lot because it brings a little more humanity to these beings that otherwise are seen as untouchable.
I think, and I also think that's down to like Fiyero as a character as well. I think he has gotten to a point now where he's like, look, I'm not pussyfooting around people anymore.
Yeah.
Like if something's up, I'm gonna tell you something's up. I mean, in fact, an example of that was last night.
Yeah.
Which I messaged our friend Mabin, who was the other character in the situation. And after I'd said what I said in the game, I literally just sent him a message that was like, "Gotcha, bitch."
Yeah. I know this is supposed to be more about my experiences with, obviously, D&D and DMing and playing, but one thing that I wanted to point out about your character, Fiero, is that when we started, he was supposed to be the character that was a little more on the darker side. He wasn't afraid to do things that others deemed as a bad thing.
Yeah.
But now, Fiero, to me, is the glue that's holding this team together, which is not something that I could have foreseen early on.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's got to a point where, although yet, I mean, like he fucking ransacked a whole village.
Yeah.
Like he is still, for me, he does still feel like the character that will be like. I mean, again, last night, fucking with that weird X stuff, he's still the character that will get something done.
Yeah.
By whatever means is necessary, and then if it causes something to fucking go wrong, like that, I mean, yeah, like the town, then he will try and sort that out later down the line when he can.
Yeah,
but
I think
his temperament has changed. I feel.
Yeah, I think he has experienced loss of. Without going too much into it, a group that were essentially like a family to him in the past. So now, from my perspective, he fills this role of the person that keeps his new family together. Yeah. And that's something that's developed that I really appreciate. He seems to be the least likely to be the sort of mother of the group. But he does sort of fill that role. He's like the stepmother of the group.
Yeah. And I think that has developed over time. I think especially it developed a little bit when we met his first mate.
Yeah, I would agree. Sticks.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I was like, it's similar to Tabaxi. That's the race she is. What the fuck is the name?
Yeah.
And I think that compounded that. And we're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then from then on. He's great.
But yeah,
but yeah, moments for you.
The reason I highlighted all of this is because those are the moments that make me want to be a DM. So when people can get so involved in their characters that they develop traits that they hadn't really expected of their characters, which is a lot like real life. So people in real life act in ways that they themselves don't even expect. And when that happens in game and they notice it and the people around them notice it and it becomes just part of them as a character, that makes me want to play.
It's cool to see, like, again, with some of the other characters we've got in that campaign, it's cool to see how they have progressed as well and become more solidified as a person.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the characters that that also recently has been giving me that sort of feeling is one that might surprise you a little bit. So we have a friend who plays the game in a way that he really enjoys. He can be mischievous in the game. So Sun recently, however, has become more of a person and a believable one at that, which is quite nice. I have appreciated that character. Not that I didn't appreciate him originally, but a lot more recently. Just because of it's more the micro interactions that he's having. He's making small choices and little strides to let people in, which is something that character's never done up until this point. Yeah. And I think it's the right time now as well, as we are progressing through this story and a lot of things have just unfolded. The character has slightly realized he needs to mature a little bit. Not the player, but it feels like it's coming from the character, and that feels good.
For definite.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think there's been like this, although it's been gradual, but there has been this kind of stepping up and again solidifying as a character and a member of this group that I've noticed. Obviously, the relationship between Fiyero and Sun is kind of a little bit rocky.
Yeah.
Because they are very polar opposite in certain senses.
Yeah. Just as a little bit of backstory to that, obviously, is his group that he works for, or worked for, is a group that you would have come to odds with in the past as Fiyero as well. So the foundations for their relationship was never there. It just was not on the table. You were aware of the people he worked for, and he was aware of exactly who Fiyero was, which of course was a pirate.
Yeah, I am playing a pirate, guys. That's I'm a scoundrel.
And obviously, Sun he's essentially a character that works for the crown. He comes from a school of mages that are taught to be protectors of the continent, essentially. So, of course, any pesky pirates that might come along, they would perhaps have to deal with them.
Yeah.
But I think, personally, the relationship is slowly forming, and I think it is going to be the most difficult one to build, but I feel like it's going to be one of the more rewarding.
I agree. I definitely agree. It's difficult to find that moment to talk to Sun, and I assume the same for Sun as well, to talk to Fiyero, because there's not many opportunities where they're both like, yeah, that's a good idea at the same time.
They tend to not be on the same page with a few things, but I personally believe that's a dynamic that you sort of need in Dungeons and Dragons a little bit, because if everyone's always on the same page and nothing ever goes wrong, then there are no stakes. And I'm a firm believer that infighting in a D&D party, if anything, just makes it a little bit more fun as long as it stays at the table. I personally like to see that dynamic, and I like to see it evolve, and perhaps they become more on the same page as time goes on.
Yeah, for definite. And I do think Fiyero and Sun will. I think that's something that will happen. Has there been a specific moment that you've been like, holy shit, this was cool as fuck? Because for me, there is one.
My personal favourite is at the King's Castle.
Same. I was the same moment.
Well, there's a character moment for yourself that I really liked, but I just think that whole experience, the battle that was created, I made even a boat diorama essentially out of foam and things. I set up a whole courtyard. The boat was actually an airship that I had to awkwardly place on top of an upside down wine glass because I had no see-through riser or anything. But that whole building of that set and putting together sort of the dragon lock tiles and things like that, and painting the minis for the big bad at the time, that felt like such a really big pivotal moment. And ultimately it ended with Fiero's criminal record being entirely expunged, completely wiped clean. So it gave Fiyero the opportunity to become who he wants to be.
Yeah.
But also the micro character moment was Amara, his deity, his god, his friend, stepping in and honestly doing him a solid as you rolled. I believe it was 2 nat 20s.
It was 2 nat 20s, bitch.
2 nat 20s. And like
On
a
advantage.
water.
So this is on the same roll.
Yeah.
With
It
advantage.
was incredible.
2 nat 20s. Like, fucking throw a cannonball at me, bitch. I'm a catcher.
Yeah, so the airship shot a cannonball at Fierro, who had to make a dex saving throw to see if he could avoid it and avoid any sort of rubble or anything that may explode out, any shrapnel, anything like that. Of course, you roll 2 nat 20s, and with 2 nat 20s, you have to do something special. There's like, that's not going to come around very often. And your deity literally formed arms and caught the cannonball, and with a flick of Fierro's wrist, launched it back at the ship that exploded the cannons. It was a very, very cool moment.
You showed the bitches. It was great.
While an insane fight was happening all around as well. You had these like homebrew creatures that resemble like giant moths with like...
I'm not gonna lie, they were real gross.
Yeah, I know. I even modded some minis as well for them. It was... Yeah, that was gross. But that was one of the fights that you got a real sense of scale.
100%. Like,
yeah.
I remember being in that fight and thinking, this isn't the only place that shit is going down in this city. Like, it is happening all over. And then you get, with that in mind, you kind of get the scale of how big this city was, and then and all of that. And I'll tell you another thing, another good point that like a moment that got me was, it wasn't that you were describing all of the big, like, all of the destruction, what's happened and all of that. It was when you brought into the, like, the whole, like, the throw of it was the, like, the destruction, but what had happened to, like, the kids and things, how there was, like, children about, they were crying, you know. I always see, there's, like, a post going around on the internet about, like, describing destruction, and it mentions about, you don't always have to describe the huge, like, grand explosions that are going on, but in, you know, just using those small moments, so like a lost shoe that's, you know, that's come off as someone, like a child's running away, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
For those big moments, describing detail in such a small area, I always find is crazy cool.
Yeah, I think one of the elements that I really liked using in that particular setting was in the aftermath. Obviously, the entire city sort of came together, but you discovered little things that had happened. So you'd been told about this council of essentially magic users that work for the Opal Conclave, which is like the magic police, as it were. And you were told how powerful they were. You even saw a few of them. And the immediate advice coming from Sun, who worked for the Opal Conclave, was just be out of the way. Do not go near, because they are very powerful. And although you hadn't even met them yet, the fact that one of them had fallen during this giant conflict in the capital city sort of showed you the scale of what was happening. And
wait, one of them fell?
One of them died, yeah. It was brought up with Madam Miriam. I believe she brought it up as you passed. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was the second highest ranked in the Opal Conclave's council, which was, it is a very big deal. He was a very powerful magic user, and you haven't discovered it in game, but he saved a lot of people in his last moments, and with that, even though, I mean, you maybe didn't pick up on it at the moment, but with that, it felt a little more somber afterwards. As like you were walking through after the battle, and you had the descriptions of just children being lost, rubble, people whose livelihoods had been destroyed. There was even, I believe you were waiting on a few orders from a blacksmith as well, whose shop had been destroyed, and he tried to give his money back, and the party was essentially just said, no, like, rebuild. We can get that at any point. And for the whole rest of the session and the next session, everything felt a little bit somber and a little bit sad, even though there was a victory there. Because of the state of everything that had happened, it just, it felt like it had happened. It felt sad. It felt somber. So yeah, that's one of the moments that I thought was really good in my campaign.
How has Mogo? I think we've discussed this. I'll ask the question, then if we've discussed it, we can move on. It's fine.
Yeah.
In fact, I know we have, but anyway, how have your characters? So, let's say Mogo or any of your NPCs. How have they developed over this time that you've since starting playing to now?
Yeah, we did touch on it a bit. Obviously, I had this initial thought for Mogo. I wanted him to be that sort of like wizard that's scared of getting into the middle of things, and he has just developed over time to be one of the people that more charge into the fray, which for a wizard is a horrible idea, but because of who he is as a person, he doesn't see it that way. He knows that, if he took, I mean, he nearly died to a troll recently. It literally picked him up and just started to squash him. And he nearly died in that moment. He did it to save a friend, which I believe is sort of who his character is. And that has slowly developed over time. Although he doesn't know these people particularly well yet, he's only been with them probably 2 or 3 weeks, I think, game time. He has grown fond of these people, and I think part of it comes down to his innate sort of affinity for tinkering.
Yep.
He sees people that he wants to help. He sees people that he thinks he can fix or put back together. As morbid and as presumptuous as that might be, he feels like they've helped him out early on. He feels like he owes it to them to fix them, although they may be angry to hear that. It's what he feels. And I think that's a really interesting, character to play.
NPCs. Are there any NPCs that have, in a sense, changed or even just developed as a character?
Yeah, I think the one character that has changed the most since the start of the campaign, and I know you weren't in at the very start of the campaign, but you joined very early.
Can I guess who it is?
Go for it.
Tolban Pendragon?
No, he has remained completely the same always. No, it's Nala Thornbrace. Nala was essentially the first.
I mean, she's not her.
Nala was the first NPC that the party members actually met. At the start of the campaign, I started the whole thing describing essentially a ship that all of the characters were on. They were held captive in a prison ship, and they were being taken somewhere that they weren't sure about. As it turns out, Nala Thornbrace was essentially a captain of a naval fleet that is under the banner of the king, King Romare. And the idea was that they had run out of people that they could send to this island to destroy what is called a sky spear. This is essentially a seed that is planted that forms this giant crystalline structure that emits waves and waves of evil creatures, and eventually corrupts the land. She had to put on this sort of larger than life, like I'm in charge demeanor with them. They were being forced to go there because they'd run out of options. There was no choice. They needed people to go. They needed to stop this thing. So to begin with, she filled an antagonistic role, which a lot of the characters still treat her that way. But over time, she grew and she came to the realization with the player characters that her father was actually a terrible, terrible person. His name's Victor Thornbrace. He was the person that led to the destruction of the castle in the capital city, bombarding it from an airship. But upon realizing that, she did everything she could to distance herself from him, although she did love him because he was a good man at one point, but certain corruptions bled into his character. She did everything she could to help the city in that moment. She then spent her time looking after the children that had been left without any parents or any home. She looked after those kids from that point up until now and further on. She is looking after those in the home that was granted to your party. Yeah. Essentially as an orphanage. She has progressed the most over time. There are a number of characters who have come and gone a few times. We do see recurring characters, but for me, she's the one that's had the biggest journey from an NPC standpoint.
Definitely. I think, I definitely think I always like to see it in characters, especially with like antagonists or what are perceived as antagonists, go through like an antagonistic depreciation. So yeah, like going from that, what appears to be the big bad. Say if you're watching a TV show in the first season, this person is the big bad, and then as time goes on and you get further into the story, say like second and third season of a show, or you know, like a month or two down the line in a story, they've that role has sort of like has literally depreciated, has become less and less.
It's kind of it's what I refer to as the Dragon Ball effect.
Yeah.
So
literally.
You look at a show like Dragon Ball, from the very original Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. I'll list some of the characters that were originally technically antagonists and have now become like main good characters. Bulma in the first episode was an antagonist. She just wanted to get the Dragon Ball from Goku. Yamcha was a criminal and an antagonist. Tien was the big bad of technically 2 seasons. Piccolo, of course, was the big bad of the entire series of Dragon Ball. Then, obviously, going on to Dragon Ball Z, Vegeta, of course, Majin Buu. Same situation, became Boob and normal Boo as well. It's the Dragon Ball effect. When a bad character comes round to the way of thinking of the good character and becomes part of his or her team. Yeah. I watched a lot of Dragon Ball as a kid.
Could not tell.
Yeah, so Nala holds a special place for me. She was the first NPC that I wrote. I wasn't 100% sure that we would leave the island that they were taken to with her alive. But certain things happened, and the party was victorious, so she also continued on.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, final question.
Okay.
Have there been any moments that you've been able to take from D&D and apply them to your life, in a sense? So has D&D helped, well, maybe not helped, or like, has D&D changed you in any way? That's the question. Has D&D changed you in any way since starting playing?
Yeah, there's a few things. So one of the main things, and this, it sort of changed the outlook that I have on the kind of person that I am.
Mm-hmm.
So, D&D is obviously a very social game, and I, throughout a lot of my life, was quite an introverted person. I quite liked being at home, playing video games, whatever. But with D&D and the current situation that we're in, which is coronavirus, I won't go into it too much because honestly, I myself am tired of hearing about it as well. It just puts a downer on everything. But since all of this has happened, my realization is that one of the main things that I enjoy about D&D is just getting a group of people together and spending, I was going to say a couple of hours, but for us it's probably about 10 hours in a day with a group of friends, having maybe a few drinks, some snacks, really just enjoying spending time with friends. So it sort of made me realize that I'm more extroverted than I initially thought.
Yeah.
The other thing, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think with a lot of the group, we're kind of extroverted introverts.
Yeah, I would say
you know what I mean. Like, we enjoy being social, but then there's a limit to that.
Yeah, agreed. But I think for me, it's one of the main factors for playing the game, because although we have played sessions while we've all been separated in our own rooms, in our own homes, and I've enjoyed it, it hasn't had that same feeling that I get from normal Dungeons and Dragons, where we all get together cramped in my little living room and just spend like 10 odd hours together. Yeah. But other than that, it has sort of made me realize that I can use aspects of myself in these characters and sort of learn things about myself in them as well. So I'm sure it's a pretty well-known fact at this point, but most of your character points or traits tend to be exaggerated versions of something to do with yourself, or for a lot of people it is. So there's little quirks that I have learned about myself, and little things that I've learned to deal with, maybe internalize and figure out what's going on in my own head through D&D. So it's little things like, obviously, as a DM, I've had this thing drawn out of me where I sort of think about it afterwards, and I'm like, oh, could I have done this better? Did people actually enjoy this aspect? Should I have not done this? Should I have not said that thing? And it's sort of a realization that sometimes I can get in my own head a little bit, but with it being D&D, I can step back and just look at it and be like, well, I've made this thing. I'm doing what I can to get everyone involved. If I feel like someone's not particularly involved, maybe I just talk to them.
Yeah.
And it's sort of helping me just talk to people about issues a little bit more, and it's something that I know that I need to be better at. So if I have issues, I've come to the realization that I probably just need to talk to someone. I tend to hold things in a lot, and then, of course, that just never ends well. So yeah, D&D brings a lot out of people, I think, and from an outside perspective, you would never know that. If you hear someone, you've never played D&D, and you hear people talking about it, a lot of people's immediate reaction is, oh, well, that's a little bit odd. But it can teach you real sort of life lessons.
100%.
And I think that should be celebrated. That should never be looked at as other or strange or weird. And if, on the other side of the coin as well, if you see someone that is viewing it that way, maybe just introduce them to it a little bit and speak to that person. Of course, if it's a friend, don't just go up to strangers and be like, you're wrong, here's why you should think this, because that's never going to go well. But I think I want to see more open dialogue about the game, because for me, it's an exercise in improv, it's self-exploration, it scratches like a creative itch that everyone naturally has. Everyone likes storytelling to some degree, and that's what it essentially boils down to. You are telling a story and you're getting people involved in a story. It's the reason that video games work so well. You can go and watch a movie, but you'll never have the same experience as playing a story in a game by watching a movie.
Like, watching a movie, you're watching someone else's story. You play a game, like a video game, or play D&D. It's your story. You get to play it out however you want, and I think there's something super gratifying about that.
Yeah, exactly. I've had that mindset since I started playing the game, and I really appreciate it.
Lovely. Well,
yeah.
On that note, thank you very much for coming to join us for episode 4 of Conversations with Samantha.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me on.
It's all right. You're very welcome. This has been a really, really good episode. I am very, very happy with this.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Conversations like this are always cathartic as well. I just really like sitting down, and you know what it is? It's the one-to-one talk with someone that wants to appreciate something that you're really passionate about. Exactly. And I think that feels good, and everyone should have that in day to day, I think.
Yes, exactly that. And on that note, I will see everyone at some point. I don't know when. See you later. Before I go, social medias, Twitter at Josh_Hinkins. Instagram is exactly the same for myself. What about you, Mike?
Mine is just my name on everything. It's just Mike O'Raw, Mikeoraw. Any
spaces, underscores, any special characters? No,
nothing at all. Cool. Just as it comes.
Rightio. Well, again, thank you very much for listening. We've been great guests on this episode. You've been a great audience. See you later. Bye.